So you want to be a boudoir photographer, and you know there's a lot to learn. You basically got two options. You can either figure it out on your own, which takes a ton of time, or you can work with someone else who's already doing it and learn way, way faster. But is it worth it? Let's find out. Hello, my name is Mike Lloyd. I am a professional boudoir photographer in Silicon Valley, California. I've been doing this since 2010 and teaching since 2012. I am a huge proponent of education, but rather than sit here and me tell you why you should work with me, I am instead going to interview someone who I just coached for the first time yesterday and get some real feedback for myself, as well as share with you the experience that we had so you can decide for yourself, is it worth it? So you're going to pay for your education with one of two things. Actually, both. You choose how much of each. It either costs you money or it costs you time. That is inevitable. So you can either take several years to figure things out on your own, or you can work with a coach who already knows how to do it and how to teach it to you, which are not the same thing. You can shave years off of that timeline. So it's just a matter of asking yourself, is it worth it to do something in 1 year or in 5 years? How much is that 4-year gap worth? This could be 6 months or 6 years. It could be 2 years. It could be 20 years. It's different for everybody. But either way, you are weighing your time against a short-term investment in your future. So let's talk about our sesh yesterday.
Let's do it.
So one of the biggest things we worked on was using flash versus natural light.
Correct.
You were really only shooting natural light before because you're kind of new to the game, right?
Yeah, so I generally do family photography, so I'm usually outside. And so this was like very new to the game with boudoir. I've only done a couple shoots only because people asked me to, so I definitely did not know what I was doing, like brand new newbie for sure. Even with that, because I was normally used to shooting outside, I have never used a flash before, like even on my camera. I've never used box lights, I've never even used a flash on the camera. So it was definitely new to me to be able to kind of be able to play with that and be able to discover like what I was able to do that I couldn't do before.
Yeah, totally. So how different was it in approaching the shoot using natural light versus flash?
Yeah, so I think that some things are easier because you have, like, instead of being a slave to whatever light happens to show up at the moment, you're actually able to, like, control it and manipulate it the way that you want it. I think the thing that's going to be new for me to learn is just to remember, like, if I move my subject, if I move, like, if we're turning or any of that, to move the lights around the room too. So I think that's going to be like a little bit of a dance that I don't already shooting natural light have to deal with as much.
Yep.
But it will allow me to be able to use the full room instead of just wherever the lighting was allowing me to before.
Exactly. Because you did that shoot renting out the Airbnb before. Mm-hmm. And how many photos did you take at that session?
I think I took over 1,200 photos. Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Just a couple.
Right? Why were you taking so many photos?
I think part of it is because, again, being used to shooting family photography, you have to go in case like a kid blinks or sneezes or pinches their brother or whatever. So kind of catching that. But also I think it was like a lot of like trying different things, but being kind of like not sure if the light is working yet or any of that. So it was kind of like click, 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 click. And it's like, oh, I should have like clicked and then looked and then clicked again instead of just being like, all right, let's see what happens. You know?
Yeah. You're just like shooting a ton of frames, hoping that one of them worked.
Yeah.
Instead of being more intentional about it.
Exactly.
But without control over the light, being able to say, okay, I want my light to go here. Now I want to move it to this direction. You didn't have that before.
Right.
So you were just figuring out, how do I make the most of this situation?
Exactly.
Yep. So working with the natural light, like you said, now you have to think, okay, if I'm going to move around my subject, now I have to move the lights with me. One thing we worked on yesterday was just slowing down.
Yeah.
How uncomfortable was that?
It actually is really hard to slow down. First of all, again, with families, you got to shoot faster. Everybody's done. You know, you're generally shooting with someone who wants to be there as opposed to like husbands and children, if we're, you know, being specific. And, you know, more comfortable a lot of times, like sitting in a chair or in a bed instead of like standing up outside in 80-degree Houston weather. It's good to slow down. It's just a hard mentality to take because I'm so used to being like, okay, in and out in 30 minutes to 60 minutes. And it's like, no. It's good to take the time. Everybody's happy when it doesn't feel like you're in a race.
We're moving quickly because we don't want them to sit there in the pose and think about how awkward it feels, how awkward they must look, and then get in their own head with things. But there's definitely a balance of keeping things moving along with just going way too fast.
Right.
Posing and direction. This was sort of along the same lines with the natural light versus the flash. How did you give direction before versus how we did it yesterday?
Yeah, so I think before what I would do is just kind of naturally see where they ended up and then move them from there. So I think part of it is because they feel more comfortable if they start out in their position is like kind of my mentality, like, okay, you look great. And then helping them move around that if they don't look as great in the photo as they do in person, which it can happen. And then just making sure, like limbs don't look truncated and those kinds of things. Those are things that I was not naturally good at until working with a coach. You need a coach because they can tell you things you don't see on your own, right? And it's like, okay, you're losing the limbs. It's like, oh, I did not notice that, right? So it's exactly what you said. Even if you spend a lot of time and you're paying in time, if you don't have someone giving you direct feedback, you can't get better.
Right. Yeah.
And your clients aren't going to be like, hey, I hate that photo and I don't know why. They'll just maybe not buy that one.
100%.
And it's like, well, okay, but having somebody say, hey, that photo doesn't look good because of this, change it next time, like that's worth its weight in gold.
Right? One of my favorite quotes is practice makes permanent, not practice makes perfect. Because I don't care how many times you practice the wrong thing, you're never going to get good at it. So when it came to giving posing direction, we went through the posing book, we picked out poses that we wanted to do, following the guidelines that were in there. How did you look at posing different? Like my philosophy on posing, how is that different from where you were before?
I think that like you naturally see the world in shapes and like as a picture in whole. And that's not the way that I look at it, generally speaking, which is again why I take too many photos, because it's like, I don't know, we'll see later. Let's see what happens, right? And so being able to like have the posing ideas ahead of time and how to get them into that really helped, again, make it way more intentional.
Yeah. And I was not always good at this. This was absolutely a developed skill because I've been doing this for 13 years. And one of the first workshops that I ever taught, it was an avant-garde lighting workshop at Stanford University. I taught on the campus. Stanford didn't hire me for my first ever workshop. I don't know who would have been making a more poor choice there. Teaching this class on campus. And afterward, there was another photographer who used to give me some feedback on my stuff. And he looked at my work. He's like, these are cool photos, but you need to learn how to pose people. And I'm like, but I love these pictures. They're great. And he's like, yeah, but they're wrong. I'm like, oh. And I remember like not heartbroken, but just almost deflated.
Yeah.
But deflated, motivated. Like, okay, yeah, let's do this. I am going to learn how to pose. So when I show people that I look up to my work, they're like, yes, that's great. Also just because I hate being bad at things and I want to be the best at everything that I do, no matter what it is. So this conversation was too good to fit into one video. So we are spacing it into 2 parts. And part 2 hasn't come out yet because we haven't had the conversation yet. So in the meantime, if you want to learn more about what we did yesterday, check out the video 10 boudoir poses to get you started, where I go through this book with my friend Amy, the one featured in the book, and we walk you through exactly how to do 10 of my best-selling boudoir poses. So that's basically what we did yesterday. You can get a little sneak peek of that while you wait for part 2 to come out.